Hi everyone, and welcome to the Ari Writer channel. My name is Ari, and today I'm very excited to talk with you all about a symbol that really matters to me a lot, and it's called the Triforce. The Triforce is a symbol that originated from a game called The Legend of Zelda. I'm assuming that many of us have already heard of it before. And it became popular as an interesting symbol that basically represented three people. In the game, it represents Ganon or Ganondorf, who represents power, the red portion of the top triangle. Zelda represents wisdom on the bottom left side of the triangle. And Link represents courage. And in an interesting way, Link embodies all aspects of the Triforce most of the time, and Zelda as well, because they both have to basically gain enough power and learn a lot of things, and then when they use their power and their wisdom to actually do things, then that's how they basically save the world, among other things, of course. And so, while the Triforce does come from that game, when I first learned about it as a teenager, I actually really was fascinated by the symbol itself, and I thought about what it really means. And so to me, the Triforce is really, really special. So special, in fact, that I actually decided to get a custom laser engraving from Mir, by the way, shout out to them. And this custom engraving means a lot to me because it's another aspect of the Triforce, and it's basically, if you guys haven't seen, my channel logo. And basically how it works is that the Triforce typically has three parts to it. But if you look at the symbol of the Triforce, there's actually a middle triangle that's upside down, and in the games it has no significance whatsoever. So what does that mean? Well, I decided to give it basically a meaning. That fourth triangle does mean something, and what's nice about it is it's not a fixed aspect, it's actually an interpretation. And so, of course, everything here is an interpretation from my perspective, but I'll share with you all what it all means now. So, typically with the Triforce, we basically need to start off with power. And power essentially is the first aspect because if you think about it fundamentally, with human beings especially, we basically have power when we're born. We are born with bodies and brains, and they start to develop. We're born with different senses and different organs, such as our eyes, ears, mouth, etc., etc. And so we're given power from the get-go. What we don't really have when we're born is wisdom. It's something that we gain through experience. So over time, basically, we start to have certain experiences, we then learn different kinds of skills, and this is where our wisdom really comes from in life. And then, by having power from the get-go, gaining some wisdom, we can finally do things. Now, it's not necessarily in that order, but most of the time this is in that order, this cycle that I like to call it, and I actually call it the tri-cycle. And so, like I said, we have some power, we then learn some stuff, and then when we do things with courage, something happens. Basically, I like to call this the result. This is where that upside down triangle in the middle of all three of the fundamental aspects comes from. So the result could be anything. It could be something good, it could be something bad, it could be something neutral that doesn't have any emotion tied to it. To me, the result that I like to strive for always has to revolve around love. And so, back to my bottle. I have a very unique Triforce that I made from some of the symbols on Mir's website when you do their custom etching. Thanks again, guys. And basically, I like to start from the bottom on this one, because this set of symbols here, in my opinion, represents a tree, so to speak. And so the bottom triangle here represents power in some ways, and there's a lot of little branches here that, from afar, they kind of look like roots. And so we could say that the roots of a tree are very powerful. And when you have a strong, stable base and a strong trunk of a tree at the base, there's a harder chance for the tree to basically be blown down during a hurricane or a tornado. Obviously it happens, and this is an analogy, of course. So basically, this symbol here represents power, and I, could have used other symbols and drawn my own thing, but from the stock images, I think this one was a pretty good representation. This next triangle here represents wisdom, and what I've done with it is something interesting. I drew it upside down, and it's connected right at the tip of the triangle at the bottom. And so if you look at these two triangles, they represent an hourglass, which represents time. Time is a factor that in many ways, is one of the only ones that limits us in life and forces us to make the best of every moment and to appreciate every moment as much as possible. And so, power and wisdom together in this instance basically are the essence of time, so to speak. And time is also immoralized here, and so I thought it would be pretty important to basically make the symbols connect in that way. You could also say that now this part here is representing the tree starting to branch out, so to speak, and so basically an upside down triangle represents starting from the trunk of a tree and then branching out to smaller branches and smaller leaves and then fruit, etc., which is all very symbolic. So we have power and wisdom, and then I basically found this plant and I liked the shape of it, and I thought, you know what if I stick it right at the top of this triangle here, representing one of the branches of the tree, and representing how plants are constantly fighting gravity and constantly getting taller and taller in order to get closer to the sun so that they can grow bigger and bigger. That analogy to me is really, really important for me as a person, to keep striving against forces that are maybe natural forces or forces that we don't have control over, such as different natural characteristics of our bodies, nature, as they say, and even natural disasters and weather and phenomenon like that, and even other people in our lives that can make things a little bit more difficult. But with all of this in mind, we can overcome it. If a plant that doesn't really have a brain and just basically exists and have this predetermined DNA, so to speak, basically is always striving to get bigger and stronger, so should we. And so now we have the Triforce embodied in the symbols right here. And at the top, you guys may have noticed the musical notes. This to me is a nice, very casual, very fun representation of love. And so for me, once we have a stable foundation and learn how to grow, we can then actually grow, and then we can produce something. And in this case, we can produce music. I'm a musician. I've been playing piano since I was 11 years old, and I took formal lessons until I was 17. Now I'm 33, so I actually really love music, and I've begun to sing and harmonize more, and I'm a big composer and a big proponent of music theory. Not a good sight reader when it comes to playing piano. I play by ear mostly. And so, to me, music is such a fundamental component of life that doesn't really have a specific emotion tied to the overall idea of music. Music just is what it is. It's just sounds coming together to form something typically pleasant or interesting to listen to. We could take a child, for example, and we could essentially allow them to sit down and play on a piano. And if it's their first time playing, what are they going to do most of the time? They're probably just going to start pressing their hands everywhere and just playing a bunch of random notes, and it can be a little bit jarring to hear. It's not really pleasant. They're essentially creating chaos. At the same time, they're also experimenting, and some children do this a little bit differently. Some will just press all the keys really, really fast, and some will play a few notes at a time, and then some will start to make connections between the notes. And so this is where the idea of a chord comes from, where basically when we take certain notes that pair well with other notes and harmonize with them in some ways, certain major chords, minor chords, seventh chords, and beyond, then we can actually create chords, which are typically very pleasant to listen to. And it doesn't matter whether it's pleasant music, or very angry and emotional music, or calming music, or very energetic, exciting music. Basically, it's just music. And so, to me, the Triforce is really important because it reminds me that I do have a lot of power, and so do all of us. We can learn a lot in life, and there's so much to learn, even beyond the basics of satisfying physiological needs and things like that. I'm going to make a Maslow's hierarchy of needs video very soon to talk about that in more detail. But once we gain a certain amount of wisdom, we can then do a lot of things. And fear is the opposite of courage, and it's something that I've thought about for a long time. I think that fear, almost all of the time, is a bit of a detriment. There's almost no need for it. Yes, in a survival situation, it's great to have some fear because then our instincts kick in, our adrenaline pumps, and we can typically put ourselves in a favorable position to survive. But in most cases in life, fear is a detriment. And so I try to remind myself, if I feel afraid to do something, that it's okay. I am strong, I have some power, I'm wise, I've learned a few things, and I can do some things. And when I do, typically when I do things in life, whether I'm talking to someone or working or even just creating music, hopefully everything that I do has a connection to the end result of some form of love, whether it's music, whether it's sharing knowledge, whether it's listening to someone and also giving them advice if they ask for it. I think that it's really important for all of us to really embody these aspects of life and to become better and to continuously improve so that we don't stay stuck. And what's cool is that once we do stuff and we gain and or give love to other people, I think we gain more power. So as long as we continue creating tricycles and continuing to improve ourselves and to not be afraid to do what we want and to share almost anything that we want with people within reason and respecting other people's boundaries and their private property and all that stuff. But once we continue to share more, I think that it's going to help not only ourselves but everybody else. And my goal is to empower people. And so I hope that this video helps you guys empower yourselves, because in the end we can only make our own choices for ourselves. And this is what I choose. I choose to recognize my power and to be humble about it, because there's so much to learn. And so with all the wisdom that I have, I always remind myself that I don't need to make assumptions about what I necessarily think is right or wrong. There's so many paradoxes in life that teach us that right and wrong doesn't really exist. And in the end of the day, if I am feeling a little bit shy to maybe talk to someone or to talk about a specific issue that maybe I'm having at work, for example, or to even share something that really matters to me with a family member that maybe has a bit of criticism in it. To me, I think it's important to share that and not keep it to yourself. Because when you keep it to yourself, then it just stays within you. Then you build resentment, and not only do you not grow, but the other people around you don't necessarily grow. And so we can all benefit from getting advice from each other and getting help from one another and just showing each other true love. And so basically this is why the Triforce is so important to me. I actually have a tattoo of the Triforce that's really important to me. And the symbols that I chose are the following. Power represents a little energetic being. So it basically is represented by a circle and the arms and legs that are just lines coming out of that circle. In a way, power looks like Navi from The Legend of Zelda, which is a cool little homage that I put there on purpose. And wisdom, to me, represents a spiral that basically begins at the center and has two lines going counterclockwise to each other and perpendicular to each other, or actually parallel to each other now that I think about it. And they keep spiraling until they get to the end of this triangle, and of course beyond, meaning that wisdom doesn't end. There's always more that we can learn, and we need to be humble while at the same time being confident with what we know and sharing that with other people without fear. And that's where courage comes in, which is why typically the main character of The Legend of Zelda that we play as is Link. It's almost always been Link. And he represents courage, and the fact that doing has much more of an impact than just having power and knowing stuff. Doing is so important. So my symbol for courage is a hammer and a nail, because I like to build things. I like to build relationships, but I also am a draftsman, so I like to draft floor plans and designs and concepts and mechanical parts and things like that. And one day, I'm going to help build my own house and help design it. And I'm helping other people renovate their own homes and add second floors to them and redo their garages, for example, and change a lot of things, and helping people design their homes from the ground up. And hopefully one day I'll be able to help people to maybe create a kind of community of positivity where we recognize our power, want to gain more wisdom, and want to have discussions with each other about almost anything. And then that we just want to do things out of love, and hopefully we don't make too many mistakes in the process. But that's okay, because when we do make mistakes, we need to recognize that, move on from them, learn from them, and the other people around us, we can also learn to forgive each other for those innocent mistakes a bit more, and to really realize that if we're here and we have a limited amount of time, we may as well do our best and try our best, right? So That's it for this video. This is all about the Triforce, and the next one I'm going to come up with is about the Flower of Life. It's another symbol that I really have a lot of connection with, and it's also part of my tattoo. I'll talk about it very soon. Hope you all have a great rest of your day.